You're going to take notes over solving quadratic equations by completing the square. So remember, a quadratic equation, it makes a U shape called a parabola, and the solutions are where it crosses the x-axis. So most of the time you're going to have two solutions. So completing the square is just another way to solve, which we've already learned some other ways to solve. This is just one more way how you can get those solutions. So if I have a problem here, first thing you're going to do is move the constants to the right and move all the variable terms to the left. So you're going to take 12x and move it over. So you're going to keep x squared where it is. And when you move the 12x over, it's going to become a negative 12x. So I moved the variable terms to the left of the equation. Both of these are variable terms. They need to both be on the left side of the equation. Now this is the constant term, the 5. Constant just means the number with no x. I'm going to move this to this side of the equation. So it was a positive 5. When I move it over, it's going to make it a negative 5. So now I have all of my variable terms on the left. My constant term is on the right side of the equation. Okay, the next step, you want to see what makes a perfect square. So I have x squared minus 12x plus blank equals negative 5 plus blank. I'm going to put a number here that will make this a perfect square. So to get that number, this is what you do. You do b divided by 2 squared. So remember, you have ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the standard form of a quadratic. I want to see what makes this a perfect square. So my b is negative 12. I'm going to do negative 12 divided by 2 squared. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 squared is positive 36. So if I plug in a 36 here, that would become a perfect square. If I do something here, I have to do it to the other side of the equation. So that's why I have 2 blanks. So if you don't remember what a perfect square is, let me just go over that. So a perfect square, remember when you have something in factored form? So let's just write this in factored form. I have x squared minus 12x plus 36. And if I add negative 5 plus 36, that will give me 31. So this is a perfect square. If I take the square root of the first term and the last term, the square root of x squared is x, because the square and the square root cancels each other out. I'm going to copy this sign. If it's negative, you copy down a negative. If it's positive, you copy down a positive. The square root of 36 is 6. So my perfect square is x minus 6 squared, and it's going to equal 31. So remember what a perfect square is. This is going to be a side note. If I have x minus 6 squared, that means you have x minus 6 times itself, x minus 6. So if I multiply that using the box method or using FOIL, I'm going to get x times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. Negative 6 times x is negative 6x, and negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. So remember, you combine your middle terms. So it's going to be x squared. Negative 6 plus negative 6 is negative 12x plus 36. That's what I mean by perfect square. It means if you take the same number times itself, it gets perfect numbers. You get a perfect square of 36. Then the middle terms are added. So this is what you're trying to find. This is a perfect square. So now the step for completing a square is complete. So the next step on the next page, to copy where we left off, x minus 6 squared equals 31. You can go ahead and copy what I have. So I want to solve for x. That's the goal, to solve for x, get x by itself. So first thing I need to do is get rid of these parentheses and get rid of this square. The only thing that will get rid of a square is to do the opposite, which is square root both sides. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So this square and the square root, they cancel each other out, and it leaves you with x minus 6. That's this rule right here. The square root of anything squared is itself because they cancel each other out. Equals. Now the second rule is when you introduce the square, the radical, to a problem, you must use plus or minus. So if I do this, I gotta put a plus, a minus in front of it. So I'm almost done solving. So I want to get x by itself. What's in front of the x, what's next to the x is this minus 6. To get rid of the minus 6, you do the opposite. You want to add 6. So they cancel. You have x equals. This 6, since the square root of 31 is not a perfect number, it's a decimal, I'm going to just leave it. I'm going to write it like this: 6 plus minus the square root of 31. Now, if I wanted to, I could type that into the calculator and find the decimal that it equals. So if I wanted to, I would do 6 plus the square root of 31, enter, and it will give me one decimal, and I will do 6 minus the square root of 31, and will give you another decimal. And I just rounded them to the nearest hundred. So that's how you solve. Let's work another example together. Go ahead and copy this. These are the steps. Solve by completing the square. X squared plus 8x plus 7 equals 0. Step 1, move the constant left. Move the other variables right. Find what number makes it a perfect square. Step 3, write it in factored form. That's x plus a number squared, or it could be x minus a number squared. 4, solve, square root both sides. 5, solve for x. So the first step we're going to do is make sure the variables are on the right, the constant is on the left. So here are my two variables. They are already on the right side of the equation, so they're going to stay. This plus 7 here, that's the constant. That needs to move over. So when I move that over, instead of it being a positive 7, it's going to be a negative 7. So that's the first step. Make sure your variables are on the right side of the equation, your constant is on the left. I wrote that wrong. Constant would be on the right, variables on the left. So second step, I want to find what makes this a perfect square. So I have x squared plus 8x plus blank equals negative 7 plus blank. I want to put what makes this a perfect square right here. So there's a little formula for that. B divided by 2 squared. So here's my B. I have 8 divided by 2 squared equals 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So I'll put 16 in both of these blanks. Step 3, I'm going to write this in factored form. So to write this in factored form, I'm going to take the square root. If I square root this, the square root of x squared cancels out, leaving you with x. The square root of 16 is 4. Then I keep this sign here. If this is positive, I put a positive here. So this is my perfect square. To get that, this would always be x. So you can just immediately copy down x here. Whatever sign here, you copy it down. For this number, you take the square root of your last term. Take the square root of this one. So negative 7 plus 16 is positive 9. So that's step 3. It's in factored form. Step 4, square root both sides. So square root this side, square root this side. Square root cancels with the square, leaving you with x plus 4 equals. When you square root this, you have to write plus minus. The square root of 9 is a perfect square, so that's going to be 3. So almost, the x is almost by itself. Do the opposite. If it's x plus 4, you do minus 4. X equals negative 4 plus or minus 3. Now, since these are whole numbers, I can figure it out. I don't want to leave it like that. So it's going to be x equals negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. Then negative 4 minus 3, negative 7. So those are your two solutions.